Hi everybody, Marcel here again with another episode of Everyday Leadership. I'm really excited about today's episode because it's a subject that's really close to my heart, and of course it's big on communication. But what's really exciting is we're really going to focus on body language in communication today, and I'm going to do this with no other than the amazing Ric Phillips. And Ric Phillips is a TEDx speaker. He's he's been on TV how many times? This guy is an absolute expert in the field. And on top of that, he's also an associate professor at one of the universities here in Toronto and in the area here. And so he's going to be sharing a lot of information with us on this subject. So I'm going to bring Ric in just a second. Here we go. So, hey, Ric, you are now live and online. Please say hi to the audience.
Hello, everyone. How you doing? Nice to be here. Thanks, Marcel.
Yeah, no worries at all. So wow, hey, we got a first comment. So this is actually, you have a comment from Zimbabwe, who's saying hi. So Dr. Philemon from Zimbabwe. Hi, Dr. Philemon.
Hello.
And he is in Zimbabwe right now, and I did a session for him a little while ago at an HR conference. That's how we met. So thanks. And so we have some other people chiming in. So it looks like we're going to get some good momentum going today.
Good.
And remember, audience, if you have any questions for Ric today, right, this is your opportunity because he's here to share with you. And so, just feel free to chime in. I will pop in those questions whenever they come. So before we get started, Ric, of course my audience knows me, but my audience might not know you so well. Mm-hmm. So, tell us a little bit about your past and your history and where, kind of how you all ended up into the kind of the field that you're actually currently working in.
Yeah, sure. So my background is sociology, psychology, which I studied at university, and these days coaching, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, body language. That's kind of the background. And I'm a professional communication coach and corporate trainer here in Toronto. And I run a company called 3B Communications. That's the quick snapshot. And as you mentioned, I'm a part-time teacher at York University and Schulich School of Business here, and I work with an entrepreneur training company, and I have a nonprofit I'm attached to. So I'm kind of a busy guy. How I got it to what I'm doing now, I mean, that's the great question. A lot of people say, "Hey, how did you get there?" It was a bit of a snowball. I think there was a point in my life when I just combined my skills and interests and passions, and kind of went forward as a communication coach. Again, the background I just mentioned. But if you want to know how I got into the interest, I guess, of this field of, people and body language, it was, first of all, I guess I'm born with a certain personality that is oriented towards, social norms and what is society supposed to do and how do we figure out the rules. So my mind was kind of wired that way to try to figure out society on that level as a group, not just always the individual. And in terms of nonverbal communication, I'm going to show you something. I don't know if you know this book or not. This is an old book from 1970. This is the first body language book I read. You can see, if you zoom in, you read those are phrases around that woman that you would never see printed today, right? Because they're very much politically incorrect. Like, how do you tell if she's, loose or this or that? So this book was the first body language book I ever read. And there's a few other body language experts I know that have the exact same experience. When this book hit in the 70s, of course, I was a little bit older before I read it. It was the first book to hit the society that kind of said, here's body language simplified. And the good thing was it made it accessible. So it's out of the laboratories into the hearts and homes of everyone. But the bad news was it oversimplified body language. So the book kind of suggests, like, if they do one thing, then suddenly it means this. But at least it was the starting point. So that's how I got started a long time ago. And then since then, it's been a lot of other study.
That kind of reminds me, it's awesome that you brought that up. It actually reminds me a little bit of Dale Carnegie's book, right? And in 1937, right? Titled "How to Make Friends and Influence People." I mean, in today's age with leadership and things like that, I'm not sure if we're if it's ethical, right? To use kind of language and communication to manipulate
right? Relationships and things like that. But back in those days, they just thought very differently about these kind of things, right? So
yeah, and that company's still going strong, and that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, still very strong.
Still around.
I've read it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, a lot of people read it. A lot of business schools, require you to read it. So, if nothing else, it's interesting. But it's interesting when you read in the context of when it was written. Then if you put your mind there, then it's okay. But if you try to look at it from today's point of view, yeah, there's some advice that is a bit questionable.
Yeah. It's interesting. So you say you're also lecturing at university. What is that subject matter on?
So there's some different subjects. So one is the entrepreneurship and leadership category.
Okay.
So working with training entrepreneurs, for-profit, nonprofit, here and abroad. And the other category is the health. York University has something called Health Learning Leadership Network. It doesn't matter. The point is it's training doctors, nurses, frontline workers, or administrators of healthcare organizations. So I do some training with them. And then I also do training called the 3MT pitch. So the 3MT, 3-minute thesis. It's a worldwide competition where people doing their master's or PhD have 3 minutes only and one static slide to pitch their thesis to a general audience. So it has to be very much in layman's terms. So this is not something we invented. This came out of New Zealand a long time ago, but I trained the people at York University how to prepare for the competitions for that.
That must be incredibly difficult, right?
Yeah, it is.
It kind of reminds me of, because you want to study something, right? You want to write a thesis on something you're deeply passionate about, right? And I remember that kind of reminds me of when I was writing my book, and I remember when I wrote the first version of my book. It took me 2 months to write the first version of my book, and I'm not kidding. And it was probably about 600 pages, right? And I sent it to the editor, for kind of the initial edit, because it goes through multiple stages of editing. And I got the book back, and it was like just red stripes and crosses and things like, this doesn't make sense, and where are you going with this, and what are you doing? And the long story short, it took me another 10 months to compress it down from a 600-page book to a 98-page book, right? That is just a lot more concise and tells a story. And what an art form that is, right? To be able to articulate the message in such a clear and concise way. So that must be a lot of fun too, though, I can imagine. Right?
It's fun. You have a lot of students who, as you say, they're passionate or they're knowledgeable about a certain field. Maybe it's engineering or health science. Maybe they've got the next cure for cancer, but they've got to be able to articulate it to a general audience, or else they're not going to get funding. They're not going to get support, or they're just not going to get people to understand. So it's the messaging in terms of the verbal message, and but as a presentation, then you got body language and all that stuff too, and the slide itself. So yeah, there's a lot of components. As a matter of fact, if I could just say, the reason why I called my company 3V Communications is because we have 3 modalities of communication. So verbal, vocal, visual. So whenever I'm doing any type of coaching training, I'm always thinking, how do I kind of address the verbal message, the vocal message, and the visual? And of course, body language is part of that visual communication or nonverbal.
Okay. Perfect. And let's expand on that a little bit, because that in itself is a really interesting conversation, right? Verbal, vocal. And so how does that all kind of work in day-to-day life, right? That might be a good one for the audience.
Right. So I think so. Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is for everyone just to, first of all, understand that the communication is a big umbrella term. But if you think about it, verbal, vocal, visual, this is both for giving and receiving. So verbal is just the words themselves. So let's say your grammar, for example. So if you send a text to someone with improper grammar or proper grammar, what's the message? So that's just an example. That's verbal communication. If I say hello, or if I say hey, it's not right or wrong. It's just a choice, right? I'm giving a message. If I say yo or hello, sir, it's just different. So verbal. Now, vocal is the delivery method, this kind of rhythm, speed, volume, intonation, right? So I'm like, if I say, hi, how are you? Or if I say, hi, how are you? Or hi, how are you? It's just a different delivery method. And maybe I'm sending on purpose or by accident a certain message with that. So that's vocal. And then visual communication, it's body language, but it's anything the person can see. So it's your clothing, your jewelry, it's how your office is set up. If you meet someone at a location, how the desk set up, it's anything. So it's visual communication is huge. And so the biggest chunk of how we give and receive information is that visual communication, and then it goes to vocal, then verbal's the last one. So it's not to say that words are important, but it's the old advice your mom probably gave you. It's not what you say, but how you say it. So the nonverbal communication trumps the verbal communication every time. We want to make sure that we understand that people will look to the nonverbal, which is the two last V's, vocal and visual, to get the real message behind whatever you're saying. That's it.
Context,
so if your friends,
right?
if your friend says like, "Oh, shut up, you silly guy, just be quiet," they know you're joking, because even though the words themselves are aggressive, but the nonverbal is very soft, and that's how we get cued, right? So we never trust the verbal over the nonverbal. We always default to trusting the nonverbal communication. So that's why it's important to appreciate and understand the nonverbal communication power.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And where do you find, like with your clients and stuff, the area where kind of generally clients struggle most? What is the one area that they have a tendency to overlook?
Well, so if you're looking at leaders in the office world, they're presenting themselves either formally, like with a PowerPoint or something, or just sitting around the desk, right, the boardroom, and they're presenting themselves. And I think a lot of them don't know how to present themselves well. So either they have no clue and they giving a lot of signals like that makes them look nervous or not confident, even if they're not, by the way, but the message might be accidentally given, or they're just they're overdoing it. They're trying to have such a perfect presentation and so sharp that people think they're fake. So it's like, meaning what? Meaning like, what do I do, right? Well, the thing is though, you need to be comfortable. You need to ask yourself, how do I want to look in this meeting or presentation or interview or whatever? I want to be calm, cool, confident. Okay, what does that mean? So let's reverse engineer this 3 V's, right? So if I know I got a meeting tomorrow, I'm thinking, okay, verbally, what should I say, not say? Vocally, what should I do, not do? Visually, what should I do, not do? And that's going to put my best foot forward, because now I'm trying to synchronize the 3 V's. It's not an exact science. It doesn't always work. There's a lot of leaking of emotions and all that stuff. But generally speaking, that's the game plan, is that you try your best to synchronize it to give this kind of message. And then the people go, oh, okay, I feel this person's whatever, strong, confident, charismatic, whatever it might be. And they overlook all the little ums and ahs or whatever it might be, that other people, worry too much about. So that's kind of the key of how to kind of think about this and how to use it to your advantage. And in the office world, it's, presentations and meetings. In the customer service field, it's conflict management, right? People are arguing with you all the time, maybe over the phone or in person. So what can I do to present something that someone who's calm and understanding, to not get stressed out? So there's a couple examples of how we can pay attention to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it kind of reminds me too a little bit of of course I'm looking at it from a neuroscience background, right? And if you're thinking about kind of the 3 levels of the brain, right? And we often talk about our cerebral cortex and the mammalian brain and the reptile brain and things like that, right? And I guess if you look at it from a communication perspective, right? If that deepest part of the brain, that reptile brain, if you look at reptiles, right, how they communicate, they don't use a lot of vocalizations and things like that. That's mostly body language, right? They communicate physically, right? Through their actions and all of that kind of stuff. And then when you have the more mammalian, kind of brain, right? That uses a lot of the vocalizations, right? So it sounds like, think of dogs and cats, and, they have body language because they also have a reptilian brain, but then they also have the vocalizations because, that's part of that limbic brain. And then there's that, what we have in that cerebral cortex, which is where our language centers are and stuff like that. So we can then, kind of use the verbalizations in terms of what we talk about. And an interesting thing to think about is that, I guess when we communicate outward, right? So when I want to communicate to you, I'm going to think in those 3 levels, right? So I'm going to think, hey, I'm going to verbalize something. This is what I want to talk about, right? And then more subconsciously, I'm going to kind of work on the tonations and the vocalizations in terms of, and then subconsciously, my body language is kind of following. Right, but an interesting thing about when we observe behavior, right, or observe language in this case, is we actually interpret it the other way around. So we, because of how the input of stimuli come into our brain, it enters into the deep parts of our brain first before it actually goes into our cerebral cortex. So even though if I communicate outward, I think top down, but when I receive information, I actually receive information bottom up. So I actually see the body language first, right? And then hear the vocalizations, and then the words that are actually being used, right? Kind of add context to what I'm seeing and hearing, right? And so it's quite interesting, and that's probably one of the reasons why there's so much miscommunication in this world, right? Is when we're applying kind of, or when we're not consciously aware, I guess, right? Of how that works and things like that. What's your thinking in terms of kind of the body language, especially from a kind of a this is everyday leadership, right? From a leadership perspective, what do you find is kind of that body language that most leaders struggle with, right? In terms of getting that message across. What is that for you? What do you think?
Right. So connecting this to the brain you were just talking about. So the reptilian brain it's just very instinctual. It's just very automatic. And there's a lot of things we do and interpret without thinking too much. So the key to ask yourself is, how do we tap into that auto response? That's the key. So if you look at it at a primitive level, like what scares us, what makes us relax, what makes us happy. So the idea of body language, and if you really, really want to boil it down, I mean, communication in general, but nonverbal communication or body language, is the person comfortable or uncomfortable? Am I comfortable or uncomfortable? So no matter what else I'm saying, let's say I'm the leader and I'm presenting something, or I'm telling people what to do, or I'm communicating with partners or investors or whatever it is, fundamentally speaking, do they get a sense that I'm comfortable or uncomfortable? That could be extended to confident, not confident, happy, not, positive. But the fundamental is comfort. Now, what can I do consciously to give this best foot forward? So I also have to understand the subconscious level. So going back to the reptilian brain, this instinctual animal, we respond to threats the same as we did when we were little primates climbing the trees. Like I always tell my participants in class, like if somebody walks behind you, remember when you were a student and the teacher would walk behind you to check your work? Did you ever get tingles on the back of your neck? Of course you did. Well, on a logical level, that teacher's not going to whack you, but it's a response to threat that you can't see. So open. People say, like, don't cross your arms in body language. Okay, why? Because it's closed and it's bad. That's true, fair. But what's the deeper meaning? The deeper meaning is I'm protecting myself, whether I'm closing my arms or turning my side, and I'm giving you a message that I don't trust you or you shouldn't trust me. If I'm opening up, I'm giving the opposite message. I'm safe. I feel comfortable, and you can feel safe and comfortable. So I'm encouraging mirroring and matching. So by understanding these kind of gut responses or reptilian brain responses to threat, to comfort, to safety, then I can manipulate that a bit. And so what do I want the leaders to do? I want them to be open, not closed. I want them to be leaning a bit towards, not far away. I want them to have this sense of good posture, taking up some space, to have some positive energy, whatever their message is. This is what we want them to do. So it's getting through to the leaders the idea that, first of all, that you can't ignore nonverbal communication. It's not all just about your verbal. That's the first thing. And secondly, to understand that there's some very simple things people can do when they're monitoring their body language or their nonverbals, like not fidgeting, not crossing your arms. And it's not about your comfort. It's about how you're going to make other people feel. So if I can do this and make you feel comfortable by having soothing, open gestures as we're chatting, if that's going to help the deal, if that's going to help the communication, I'm going to do this. But if I'm doing this all the time, listen, Marcel, I really want you to do, if you and I work together better, I think we can do some business and invest. I think it's really going to help. It's not the same as Marcel. I think you and I could do some business. Let's invest together. Let's be a team. It's a different message. The words are the same, but the nonverbal is different. So what can I do as a leader to put my best foot forward at especially these important meetings, and especially when it's kind of first impression situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that totally makes sense, right? So you're, and I see that a lot in my coaching, right? As well, where when we're delving deep into kind of the psychology of what's making people tick and what's making them drive, and very often a lot of leaders that I work with, right, their big thing is how can I influence other people, right? How can I get them to do what I want them to do? Right. And very often, of course, they're just animals of habit, and they're responding to my signals, right? Very interesting is I actually there was a question that actually popped up that actually has to do with this, and the question is how do you answer why should you be promoted, right? So I think that the question kind of relates to if somebody says, your leader, right, says to you, why should you be promoted, right? Mm-hmm. What would an appropriate answer look and feel like that actually makes that person want to go, yeah, that's actually a really good answer, right? Without necessarily talking about what the words are, right?
Right. So we go back to this idea of 3 V's. I mean, I live my life by the 3 V's, so that I always go to that as a referral. So verbal, vocal, visual. As you said, the verbal is important, but not as important as the nonverbal. So obviously with verbal, you do want some confident statements like I am, I will, I'm proven track record, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously you want some positive statements. Vocally, you want to have this kind of calmness, a medium volume, medium speed, medium tone, because you're not trying to sell the person. You're not trying to push them. And you don't want to have rising intonation. You don't want to say, well, I think I should be promoted because I've been here for 2 years and I think I've done a really good job. So none of that rising intonation is going to help in that moment. It's got to be the opposite. It's got to be, I've been here for 2 years. I think in 2 years I've done a pretty good job. I've got great feedback from the managers, which I'm sure you know. And the reason why I believe I should be promoted is because it seems to be, based on my peers, this is the right time. And I'd love to discuss it with you. So this kind of conversation, which is like a negotiation, like a conversational selling, but this tone has to be important. And then go back to this, again, the visual, the nonverbal, like am I slouched? Am I have a good posture? Am I open and using gestures in a very nice way? Or am I being awkward or giving weird signals? Am I fidgeting with a ring or with a pen as I'm trying to chat? Am I swinging my chair? There's kind of a joke that the comfortable chairs that swivel are very comfortable until you're on camera, right? Until you're in a boardroom. And then if I'm talking and I'm swinging my chair, right? I'm going, well, I think I should be promoted. Like all these things are bad. So it's like, how do I present myself strong, rooted, and have this message? So of course, verbal is important. Of course, you have to have an argument about why you should be promoted. And there's techniques for that too. There's techniques about how do I persuade and influence and that do this. But the nonverbal is what they're going to take away as well, right? The nonverbal is how do they feel? Do they feel you're comfortable with this? Do they feel that you're worthy of it, that you feel that you're worthy of it? Do they feel that you're going to succeed and do what you say you're going to do? So it's a combination of the 3 V's, always.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, especially the tonation, right? I think that's such a powerful thing because the moment we finish every sentence like it sounds like a question, right? It definitely does, kind of remove that sense of confidence, right? And I know, and I remember reading, actually, there was some research there was just recently that popped up in terms of how leaders are perceived, right? Based on just the tonation of how they end a sentence. And in terms of electability and politics and things like that, and you can change the entire meaning and the entire perception of your conversation simply by the way you end each sentence, which is crazy because it doesn't really matter. Well, of course it matters what you say, but it's not as important as a lot of people think, right? So in terms of this promotability conversation, right? If you want to place the argument why you are that person who needs that promotion, is to think about how you talk about yourself, right? When you are kind of selling yourself, right? And if you can, and maybe that's something to practice before you have that conversation, right? And maybe even recording yourself saying these things and listening for, hey, how do I actually, have that dip up or do I have my dip down, right? And being able to do those kind of things, to be able to kind of place yourself into that kind of, better mental space, right? Where you feel you can, just, that's a very important, piece.
And I will just give your audience, I know we're talking about nonverbal communication today, but I will give your audience just a quick hint in terms of the verbal, the persuasion. Always make it about the other person. This is key principle of persuasion. So even when you're asking for a job or a promotion or someone's asking you deserve the promotion, you don't just answer it from your point of view. Like, well, I want it. I think I deserve it. I need it. but also because I want to just make sure that I gave a verbal tip as well. Think about how your promotion will benefit the team and the organization.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, and that's such a fantastic tip, right? To really kind of focus on how you can kind of align yourself that way, and that's and I, of course we are talking about leadership, but I mean this to me also sounds like it's necessary in all factors of life, right? I mean whether we're parenting, because kids respond to how of the things that we're saying and how we're saying them, and do you have clients who because of course you deal a lot with professionals and leaders and stuff, but do you have clients from other walks of life as well who kind of work on that as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, to be honest, corporate training is where the money's at, and it's where the security is. So a lot of people, they end up at corporate training, right? Because you have a big company paying you for your services. They're probably not going to, at the last minute, ask to, have a week extended before they pay the check and all that stuff. But the way, when I started out, I started out like anybody. I grew my business. I was, starting out with anybody, and you would get people that were, working at a bank at a middle management level, for example, engineers, accountants. You would get some people who are university students that are going off to the next stage. You had some people preparing for interviews and job search. So there's different levels and different programs and all that stuff. So it's a diverse field because communication is this big umbrella. And like at my company, I kind of go, well, there's interpersonal communication, there's professional communication, then there's the ESL cultural, because I have a background teaching English as a second language as well. That's how I divide it at my company. Doesn't mean everybody has to do that, but that's how I do it. So if someone wants to work on their small talk skills and rapport building and first impression management, well, that's interpersonal, isn't it? And then a body language is interpersonal. But if someone wants to be a better manager, well, that's professional. But it doesn't mean that there won't be body language, because all the categories have the 3 V's. That's the secret, right? Is to always have 3 V's. But that's how I do it. And so if an immigrant, because Canada has a lot of immigrants, Toronto has a lot of immigrants, I have a lot of my business are people that are not people that just arrived. There's a lot of free government services, but people that are already working, and maybe they've reached a bit of a glass ceiling themselves. They're feeling, why am I not getting promoted, or I want to do a big change? Like those are the clients as well. So it's not just the office corporate, that's the mainstay, but like I'm always interested to help anybody. If I've got the right program, I'm going to try. And I think that interpersonal is sometimes overlooked. A lot of people talk about leadership as, how to negotiate and, how to do break presentations and how to delegate, which is all true. But some people overlook this kind of idea of the small talk skills, which can be very valuable for networking and for, interviews and all that stuff as well.
Yeah. It's that reminds me of a story, that just kind of has to do with this, right? So this happened, it kind of stuck with me, but it happened about 2 years ago. I was talking to this guy, and we were just having coffee together, and he worked for a global fitness chain, right? And he was talking about the amazing work that the CEO of this fitness chain is doing with this club. And he says the one thing that impresses him most about the CEO is that every time he'll bump into you, which might be once every so many months, right? Because this guy travels all around the world, and it's like he remembers your name, right? And he will stop to make small talk, right? Almost like from where they left off last time. Like he has this genuine interest. Right. And like, hey, I remember last time we were talking about this and that, how things been going, right? And so, which is incredible, right? If you have thousands and thousands of people that are working for you, right, to be able to kind of maintain, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think very often leaders overestimate the stuff that they're doing from a day-to-day basis, but they underestimate the stuff that they're actually doing when they're not working, right? That's right. And how are those silos, right? Kind of different silos, right? As a leader, they're every aspect of your day job is in different silos. Whether it's socializing, whether it's it's all part of your job, and how are you operating? How are you functioning? And each and every one of those silos, and are they to be able to maintain, I guess, your brand, right? As a leader, are all of those kind of in sequence? Are they aligned? And the moment that there's one of them is misaligned, if you know, for example, you can be, you know, at business meetings, you can be the most jovial and fun-loving guy, and you know, and then the moment you kind of walk out of the office, you start barking at people, right? You know, people are going to remember that, right? You know, and so all of a sudden it almost seems inauthentic then, right? Because there's no consistency, right? And then when that consistency drops down, so too does credibility, right? So yeah, so I can totally see how that is such an important part of conversations as well. It's just like, make sure that you're applying this all the time.
Right, exactly. And that's a great point about consistency. And it's also about being genuine and sincere, not just for the people interacting with you, but so that you feel comfortable. So let's say I'm training you in some sort of body language for your presentation. If you don't feel comfortable in that, it's going to come off as awkward. So it's all about, like, you've got to internalize, like, why am I studying communication skills? Like, why is it important? I have to believe it's important, you know, 3 V's or whatever it might be in body language. And it can't be just, I'm going to make small talk using this formula, but I don't really mean it. I don't really care about the person. And this is, you know, going back to the Dale Carnegie book, you've actually got to be genuinely interested in people. And, you know, what I do all the time, I talk to, you know, Uber drivers and taxi drivers all the time. When I go and get coffee at the same place, you get to know people's names. There's an effort you can do. If you want to just go, please, thank you, bye, you can do that, or you can step it up. And the funny thing is that in the service industry, like, you don't, they're getting paid anyway. They're going to be friendly, most of them anyway. Like, there's a great opportunity for you to have a bit of banter, to go back and forth a little bit, you know, and to keep your skills sharp, and to keep yourself observing body language, to keep yourself feeling connected to the humans as a society. And then when it comes to those stressful scenarios of the big meetings or the big clients, whatever, you're much more comfortable because you do this all the time. It's not like, oh, I'm going to study these tips for body language and I'm going to wait till this meeting 6 months later and pull it off. No, it doesn't work that way. You've got to be practicing all the time. You've got to be comfortable, and you've got to be genuine. You've got to genuinely feel interested in people, and forgiving of people for their mistakes, and forgiving of miscommunication, because it happens all the time very easily. You get that Zen sense of people, and then you can get along with people from all different walks of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And this actually reminds me of, and probably something I you know, now thinking about it, right, I probably could have done a better job at this, but I remember, you know, about 7 years ago, I was running trainings for another fitness chain, and it was actually for the sales teams, right? And my proposal was that if you can't sell a smile, right, you can't sell a membership. And the sales team was very confused about this, because they're like, well, you know, what revenue does selling a smile bring in, right? You know, and of course it has everything to do with how you make people feel, right? You know, and when you can make a person smile, you know, that becomes really important. So what I ended up doing was I ended up sending them out on the streets and just practice making other people smile. Just practice being kind, right? Practice being, you know, kind of just, and the amazing thing that I learned from that was how difficult it was for them. Like they have this idea or this thought that, you know, when I'm in my workplace, right, this is my workplace persona, this is the act that I need to be putting on. But the moment I walk out of that workplace, I don't have to do that anymore. I can be, you know, I can be myself, so to speak. And the unfortunate thing about that, though, is that because you're not practicing these type of basic skills all the time, like you said, you don't truly get to master them, right? And so when you are in the workplace, and even though you think that you're doing a good job, you're always going to be performing subpar, because you're not a master at these skills, because it takes, you know, tens and thousands of hours of practice to make yourself really, really good at these things, right? So using kind of every opportunity outside of your workplace to practice these same skills is so critically important. I've got a question popping up from someone. I'm just going to throw it up on the screen.
Sure.
So it's would videotaping yourself and then watching yourself to see if you sound calm, convincing, and appropriate body language, and doing it again and again and again until you are comfortable with it, be helpful. similar to like rehearsing before a major presentation. We tapped on that a little bit earlier, but maybe kind of just elaborate a little bit more on that question.
So in general, let's call it a good idea if you're comfortable with the camera. So this is the difference, right? Like, and comes up when public speaking training. Should I video you or not? You know what? Some people get really weird when they know the camera's on. So if I'm practicing for my big presentation or interview and there's a camera, my friend's got the camera, whatever, and I suddenly tense up and I'm looking and it's going to throw off everything, isn't it? So the answer is, it really depends on how comfortable you are being videoed. So in my training, I'll tell you, like, right or wrong, I'll just say, in my training, I never record people for like a long time for this presentation. I never do. There might be little clips we'll do, just, but it's about, I want to see them au naturel. I want to see how comfortable they are, and then I can give feedback on their body language and their vocal tones and all that stuff. So it's really good to have a friend or someone you trust who will give honest feedback, really honest feedback. That person should be watching. Then you can practice speaking to someone. If you don't have that person and you want to video yourself, of course, try it out. But just be aware of what I said. Some people get really weird and nervous when they're on camera, and it throws off their baseline.
Yeah, that's another really good point. I mean, I remember doing trainings, right? In many years ago, right? Whether it was sales trainings or things like that, and they would record you, right? So with a sense that you can then evaluate yourself. Right, and it does feel different, because you feel like you're on the spot, right. and being in front of a camera is not for everybody. I remember the first time I was in front of a camera, I was like, right,
exactly.
and it takes time, right, and in a way that's actually a very different skill set, right? Maybe what like you said is if you're going to be doing a presentation in front of people, right, is actually rehearse in front of people. Right, and kind of make that a little bit more specific, right, in that sense, and whether you're using your family and friends and people who can be bitterly honest with you, right, and know that you're still going to love them anyway, right, these are very often probably the best type of examples, but I do get the point though, because there is also that element of being able to kind of look back at yourself, right?
Of course.
So
especially if you're by yourself.
Yeah, exactly. But probably, if you're comfortable in front of a camera, it could probably be a good thing to practice. But maybe looking at specific things, right? That's the other thing is like you said, right, with the 3 V's. If you break it down in terms of the 3 V's,
right,
and
exactly.
say, you know what, in this video, I'm strictly going to practice my body movements. Right, what do they look like when I'm so I'm not going to worry too much about the vocalizations and I'm just going to break it down from there. Then I'm going to say, okay, now I'm going to work on the vocalizations. Now I'm going to work on the verbalization, right? So kind of being a little bit more specific in terms of what you want to practice. Then then maybe that could work. But yeah, definitely I love that point. Yeah, is always be careful with camera work because we are different. Including me, right? Yeah, exactly. So I just happen to be one of those people who is very comfortable in front of a camera, but I'm actually less comfortable in front of people, So, but that's per person kind of a different thing, right? So yeah, absolutely. And what would you say if you kind of especially with kind of the younger generations of people and stuff like that coming up, what would you say, especially, because you're seeing college students and things like that, is there generationally, right, is there a difference and a trend in terms of, how we're communicating and what we're communicating? And, so I'm also thinking on top of my head, because we're starting to depend on this overuse of technology. Right, with youngsters, of course, doing a lot of texting and reading and things like that. Are you seeing a difference kind of in the evolution, right? In terms of how we communicate, what our natural tendencies are and stuff, or not?
So it's a very good question, and it also depends like how much we listen to media versus actual science. So a lot of people want to dump on the younger generation and say, well, they're not paying attention enough. They're on their phones all the time. They're this. It's not true. I mean, every generation says that about the younger generation, but there are generational attitudes. They're like, I'm Gen X. So one of the ticks about Gen X is that we follow the results. Like if I ask someone to do something, I don't care how you do it, just get it done. So at the end of the day, I don't want to hear a big story about why you couldn't do it. It's like, here's the task. Let me know when it's done. That's very much a Gen X thing. We're results driven. Just do it. But that doesn't mean every generation has that. There might be different people have different ways of presenting their request or their orders at work, whatever. So it is worth the study, the generations and their attitudes, and you can do that. Like, you don't need me for that. There's other people that can teach that much better than I can. In terms of young people on their technology and all that stuff, well, look, I'm in my mid-40s. I'm on technology all the time. I mean, so we can't blame it on the young people, right? I'm on my phone and my computer. We're Zooming all the time. I can't take a minute without looking some fundamental, communications that we all have to master. And if somebody has a hard time with listening skills, with eye contact, for example, they're going to have a bit of a hard time. And they do have to learn, what is the appropriate eye contact for this society or this office? What should my posture be? And they will learn, and that's what I would say is it's not about the little things and all that stuff. It's different. And what I like about the younger generation, what I really like about it is they'll challenge you all the time. Because they're on Google all the time. Like, you say something in class, they can Google it in 2 seconds. If you're wrong or your information is out of date, they'll call you on it. So it actually keeps you sharp. So it all depends how you look at it, right? But it's an advantage of the younger generation, and now we're all part of it too.
Yeah, absolutely, and and without generalizing too much, right? But I also think there's something about the younger generation where they tend to be a lot more in tune with values, right? I don't know if you've noticed that, but there seems to be values, like our inherent values seem very important to the younger generation. And working with an organization, working with leaders who are in tune with their values is really important. And I hear this a lot from when I have conversation with, like, my daughter and her friends and things like that. They don't want to, work that kind of corporate type, life where they're sacrificing their life, and then by the time they get 40, they turn 40, they get retrenched by a company that absolutely doesn't care about them, right? And there's and like you said, they are a lot more vocal, right, about wanting that. They're not afraid to communicate it to the organization that they're working with, but they're also not afraid to communicate these things. And so I actually anticipate great things from this up and coming generation. It's just whether or not us older people are willing to listen to them, right? And learn from their wisdom and things that comes from that. So that's a really important point. And I'm wondering if that kind of also changes or where us, right, like we as older generation kind of leaders would need to adjust ourselves in a different way in terms of how we communicate with them, or how we can invite them to communicate with us in a way. Is there anything in there that you notice on your side?
Well, just the idea that you can train people how to communicate with you. So it's behavioral management 101. You can train people to do anything, just like Pavlov trained his dog. You can do that with people. And I'm not trying to sound rude about that. It's just simply true. You can train people.
Conditioning. Yeah, exactly. We're all conditioned. That's right. We're all conditioned to behave in certain ways. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, for example, if I never answer my emails before 11 a.m., I will condition you to understand that I'm not going to answer emails before 11 a.m. Yeah. But if I break that rule a couple times, then I'm sending mixed messages, right? So you can condition people. This is how I'm a leader. This is how I want to communicate, or this is how I want to receive the information. So by knowing yourself, you can say, look, I want to see charts and graphs because I don't want to read a bunch of text. You can literally tell people that's what you want, and you can show examples, and you can condition them, that's what I want. So as a leader of any company, any organization, you do have that kind of power to not have to go to them, but have them come to you. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying the fact is you can sort of dictate this. You're going to deliver information to me. Here's how I want it delivered.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side of that, to your question, is do I want to be more empathetic? Do I want to try different styles of communicating? Do I want to give them? And that's up to the leader. It also depends how large the organization is, how fast the organization is. There's a bunch of different questions there. But yeah, it's everyone has some favorite ways of communicating or of sending and receiving information. Do I want to pay attention? Well, your key leader group, your key team, you'll get to know them, right? Like I'll know with this person I could be very, very direct. This person I have to be indirect. This person I can swear and it's quite okay because we do that to each other. But this person I'm not going to do that because they would see that as rude. Like I get to know my leadership team and I will, you're going to tailor yourself anyway and they'll tailor their communications to you. But in terms of like a large organization, it's up to you how much you want to do that. Let's be honest, it's a little bit easier for you to tell people this is how I want information, this is how it will be presented, and then people get to know you as a leader. Oh, that's how he or she does this, and a good example of that is meetings. Let's say there's a meeting, God forbid, every Monday. Like I'm not a big fan of having weekly meetings, but let's say there's a meeting every Monday. Well, how do you do it? Like is it up in the air every time? People show up to the meeting, they have no idea what the context is or what the agenda is? Or are you sending out an agenda ahead of time? Here's the 3 main points we're going to talk about on Monday, and giving people a chance to think about it. And when they come to the table on Monday, do they feel that their opinion is valued? Or do you ask their opinion or not? Or do you say, look, let me dictate? So again, this is about you as the leader deciding how you want to do it. Do you want just, this is who I am and this is how we're going to do it? Or do you want to, give some opportunity for, them to communicate without losing control? So that's what I would do, right? I would send the agenda, at least briefly. I don't have to be too specific. Here's the big things we're going to talk about. And then I would take control of that meeting and I would say, here's what we're doing, bop, 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 bop. And then I'd have Q&A along the way, and I would make sure that we don't get steered off too far in a different direction, come back. But I want the people to feel that they had a chance to prepare and that they had a chance to communicate their ideas and opinions. At the end of the day, I'm the leader. I'll make the decision. I'll take the consensus. I'll make the decision. But I want the feeling that they're part of that. Not like just shut up and listen to me and I'm going to tell you what we're going to do just so you know. That's old school.
Yeah. That makes total sense. I'm just looking at the timing. So time is flying like usual. One last question that I would have, before we log off. What if there were like 1 or 2 things that you say, hey, listen, this is, these are some tips that I believe, everybody would benefit from, right? Mm-hmm. What would they be that you would want to share with my audience?
Absolutely. I can tell you my favorites. So obviously the 3 V's, understanding that there are 3 V's and how to use them to reverse engineer. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2, open versus closed. It's not about if you're cold or comfortable. It's about what the feeling is to other people. It's not just your arms. It could be your legs crossed, it could be your shoulder. So be more open, less closed. Second thing, towards, away. I go towards things I'm interested in, I feel safe, I feel comfortable, I show interest, and I go away from things that are scary or dangerous or intimidating. So I can, whether I'm sitting or standing, I can go in and out, and I can watch other people's behavior. I say something and they lean back, maybe they're not too comfortable. So towards and away. The third thing, cues versus clusters. We didn't talk much about this, but I kind of hinted with this book. Oh, yeah. That the challenge with the book was they give a lot of cues, like one single thing, like if they scratch their nose, they're lying. If she unfolds her legs, then she's inviting you to talk to her. And it's not true. So the cue is one thing, but if you really want to study body language, you have to look for clusters, 2 or 3 things that indicate this kind of emotion. Body language is not 100%, or else obviously the courts would work differently, but you can get an idea of the feeling and attitude of people if you're paying attention. So that's what I would tell people to use body language for. Last thing, if you study body language thinking that you're going to become Sherlock Holmes, what you will find out eventually is that you're not Sherlock Holmes, but that you'll be more empathetic, and you'll be a better listener, and you'll be able to present yourself better in public. So by studying body language, you think you're learning to read people, you're actually learning how to present yourself better. And that's the best advantage of that.
Yeah, that's what's interesting about that is very, same as in the executive coaching, right? Is very often I get hired because, somebody wants to become more effective at influencing people, but, generally speaking, in order for them to be able to influence people, they need to be able to influence themselves first. And that takes a gretter level of self-awareness and courage and humility and all of these kind of things that, a good honest look at yourself. Right, because if you can't read it in yourself, if you can't recognize it in yourself, you're not going to be able to recognize it and connect with it when other people do it as well. So, so Ric, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much information today. I'm sure the audience was, really, really excited. Some great comments that were coming through there. So thanks to the audience as well for watching and listening today. So Ric, I'm gonna say goodbye and thank you so much for. Oh, before we go, what's the best way of getting in touch with you, just in case people from my audience want to learn more or know more? I did pop up your website. And of course, your name is at the bottom. But are there any other ways that that people could potentially reach out to you or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, right? So people can search LinkedIn, find my name, and they can, hey, I saw you on the Marcel Daane show. That'd be great. And Twitter is at ComCoach. You can look me up at Twitter. But any email, I'm happy to respond to.
Brilliant, awesome, great stuff. So, Ric, thank you so much again for coming today. It was so nice to have you on the show. So audience, thank you so much for watching today.
And next week we have another couple of really exciting episodes coming up. We're going to be delving deeper into the things that we're doing with our bodies. We're going to have a person who specializes in primal dance, which is going to be really interesting. There's a lot of work that we're still going to be doing on motivation, so tons of stuff coming up. So stay tuned, stay active on my LinkedIn or on Facebook or wherever, because that's where these videos are going to be showing up. Of course, if you want to look back at this, it is also on YouTube. So all of these videos are archived on YouTube, so you can look back at them whenever you want to, just as if you want to catch up. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I will see you in the next episode. Thanks, everybody. Bye.